All right, so we're in Revelations chapter 17, picking up tonight. Clint, did you hear about that balloon?
I heard about it.
Heard about the balloon, the Chinese spy balloon. They finally shot it down. You know that wasn't a Chinese spy balloon, don't you?
No?
Okay. That was actually launched by Dollar General so they could scout the country for new locations.
Good point.
So,
Have you ever counted the Dollar Generals on your way somewhere? Like
Oh,
going to
everywhere.
like going to Kelly's in Florida?
mm-hmm.
I try to count them because it's unbelievable
And
how
that
many
stock,
there are.
that stock
Do you have a clicker?
3 years ago was below $100 a share.
It's about half of
I wish I had some stock in it.
Did it go?
I'm going to tell you what, as a daddy, I think, and I would encourage young people, when you're about 18, you need to buy some stock in Pampers or Huggies. Because we got three kids, 2 out of diapers, and I'm telling you what, I wish I had bought some stock because, I could at least recoup some of what I spent over the last however many years now. But anyway, no, I heard that this week. That is not original to me, but I couldn't help it. So anyway, we're in Revelations chapter 17. And this is the great prostitute, okay, and the beast. We're going to break this down and talk about this. We're knocking on the door there. After tonight, I think I'm predicting 6, possibly 7 more weeks, and we'll be done with our Revelation study. Now, at the conclusion of that, as I told you, I would like us to I'm going to see if I can get it all worked out where we can view that Island of Patmos play that I was telling you about. I have a copy of that, and I would like us, you're not going to watch it all in one setting because it's kind of lengthy. It might take a couple of weeks to watch it, but it'd be nice to watch it, talk about it, then watch it and talk about it, and I think it'd be a good way to conclude our study. So that'll be real good, okay? All right, so picking up here, chapter 17, verse 1, Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and said to me, Come, and I will show you the judgment of the great prostitute who is seated on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed sexual immorality, and with the wine of whose sexual immorality the dwellers of the earth have become drunk. And he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was full of blasphemous names, and it had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and jewels and pearls, holding in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and impurities of her sexual immorality. And on her forehead was written the name of mystery, Babylon the Great, mother of prostitutes and of earth's abominations. And I saw the woman drunk with the wine of the saints and the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. Okay, let's stop there just a minute. We'll talk about this going forward here. So that's verses 1 through 6. Now we pick up once again with the 7 angels, and we've heard reference again to the 7 angels. This is a throwback to the 7 angels that we've already discussed with the 7 bowls of wrath. So these are the same angels, okay? And this reference actually links chapters 17 and 16, 17, 18 together. 17 and 18 are more about the bowls of judgment, whereas 16 it extends into the second coming of Christ. So as we're here in chapter 17 and 18 focus on more on one aspect of the bowl of judgment, and that's the judgment of Babylon. And the judgments already described are identified as targeting the final world system, and we talked about how the final world system would be this political system. It's a religious, it's a political, it's a financial, it's a one world government type entity, right? All rolled into one. So we're picking up there, and so it talks about here the great prostitute, which prostitution frequently symbolizes idolatry or even religious apostasy. I'll try and make the difference there. So idolatry is worshiping someone or something other than God. That's what it is to make an idol. Okay, that's idol worship. Apostasy is a little bit different in that these are people who take the faith and then, knowing the faith, turn against the faith and corrupt their belief of the faith. I'm not kind of articulating that the exact right way, but that's what apostasy is. So you have somebody who knows the way, turns from the way, and uses their knowledge of the way in a profane or idolatrous way. That might be a better way of articulating that. We talked about a kind of a version of that this morning in our message when we talked about the slave girl that had the demonic spirit that was claiming that Paul and Silas had the way of salvation, but she wasn't really claiming that they had the way, that it was just a way, and therefore it was causing issue. So I'll digress from that. So what we see here, examples of this would be like the city of Nineveh, Tyre, and there's even been references to Jerusalem being one of these prostitute type cities. And they are also depicted as or what Scripture might call a harlot city. And she's seated, this prostitute is described as being seated on many waters. This picture emphasizes a sovereign power of the harlot. The picture is a ruler seated on a throne, ruling the waters, which is symbolizing the nations or ruling the entire world. So what we pick up here in verse 2, we see that the kings of the earth have committed these sexual immoralities with her. So the harlot will ally herself with the world's political leaders. Fornication, in this case, does not inherently refer to sexual sin, but more so to idolatry. Okay, so this is not. It's using almost explicit sexual language here, but it's a euphemism for something else. It's a euphemism for idolatry. And all the world's rulers will be absorbed into the empire of Satan's false Christ. Okay. Now, it does speak also, too, about the wine of those sexual immoralities. Now, this is the harlot's influence, and it extends beyond world rulers to the rest of mankind. And you can see reference back that. We'll see that, a reference to that a little bit later, but it goes back to some of the things we talked about in chapter 13 and chapter 14 as well. But the imagery does not describe actual wine and sexual sin, but pictures the world as being swept up into the intoxication and sin of the false system of religion. So this is kind of, this whole idolatry is going to be such a charismatic movement, such a feel-goodism, such an idea of everybody belonging to it, that it's not just going to sweep up. It's not just something the elites, the kings, and people like that. It's something that mankind is going to be swept up into. And you may think, well, Jonathan, that's not going to happen. How are you ever going to get the entire world to go along with a singular idea? Well, Hitler convinced the entire country to go along with his idea. Okay? And the Antichrist is going to be a lot more persuasive than Hitler ever was.
A big lie.
Well, I mean, listen, I know there's been a lot of chaos, and I'm not a conspiracy nut. I'm really not. Okay, we could have some fun with conspiracies, but here lately, a lot of quote-unquote conspiracies, we started finding out that they aren't. That it's only a conspiracy till it's proven true, and that's the bad thing about it. And it's so easy to convince people of something, right? And it's done by multiple facets. If propaganda, right? If I only show y'all, some guy put it this way, this is I'm trying to be careful and make sure I make sense with this because I don't want to be lewd. But he said, if I feed you, chicken mess every day, and that's all you ever get to eat, eventually at some point, if you don't know any better, you think chicken mess is pretty good, because you've never had fried chicken or chicken wings or barbecue chicken. You've only ever had chicken mess. It only takes one exposure to something that's not chicken mess for you to realize how bad chicken mess is and that there's something better out there to have. So I bring that to propaganda. If you keep getting pumped, like if somebody in the world does this already, if they want you to think a certain way, you keep hearing the same thing from different sources. You go to each news outlet. I watched something here a while back, and there was something, I don't remember what it was about, but it was almost like it was very different news sites and different reporters from all over the country, even some all over the world, and they were saying almost the exact script. I mean, it was hundreds of them. They'd play like, 15 seconds, this reporter giving a report on it, and they said this. Then they cut to another one, and a completely different news station, different part of the country, they'd say almost the exact same thing. I mean, I worked to the point where they synced it up and played it, and it was like probably 50 or 60 people on the screen with little bitty screens, and they were all saying it in unison. Okay?
Prime example of what happened with Hitler and the Jews.
Right.
He kept saying, and finally they believed it.
Right. I mean, and I say that to say this kingdom is going to be something I think people are going to, where it talks about the intoxication of it all. There's going to be an alluring to it. There's going to be a belonging to it. There's going to be a feel-goodism to it. People may even be convinced that I think most people will. They're going to be thinking that they were doing the right thing. And, I go back to Germany during the time of World War II. They believed they were doing the right thing. Throughout world history, there have been people convinced they were doing the right thing while committing atrocities. And you could just go through that. And so I'm just saying that it makes sense that the world could be enveloped if the right, everything rolled up together. You understand what I'm saying? It's a wave of, I don't know what words to use to describe it, but it's a very charismatic movement where people feel like they belong. There was a movie called The Wave, and it was based on, I understood it to be based on a true story, where a high school teacher somewhere on the West Coast, I believe it was, he was trying to teach the kids about Hitler and World War II, and they didn't understand how he could brainwash an entire society to basically bend to his will. And this teacher he created this group called The Wave, and it was based on the same concepts Hitler used. He convinced an entire class to get involved, and they were so passionate about it, they got people who weren't even in their class involved with it before the whole school was eat up with it. And it was like people were willing to give up their own freedom, their own civil liberties to belong, to be a part of something. And that's what I'm saying. So this is kind of one of those things that you got to be very, don't stick your hand in the head and stand like an ostrich. Okay. This is more than easily done. Okay. With the right circumstances. I'll digress. But, my point there was that it's intoxication. And this is the intoxication of the false faith or the false religious political system that's going to be put up. Now, in verse 3, we see that he was, this was John here, he was carried away in the Spirit. This is the Holy Spirit transporting John, and he takes him out in the wilderness. And the wilderness describes a deserted, lonely, desolate wasteland. And this perhaps is to give him a better understanding of his vision. So he sees a woman, and this woman's the harlot, and the harlot is a euphemism for Babylon. And the woman sits upon a scarlet beast, and the scarlet beast representing the Antichrist, okay, and who for a time will support and use the false religious system to affect world unity. And then he will assume political control. And the scarlet that she wears, scarlet is a color of luxury, splendor, and assumed political luxury, splendor, and royalty. I knew that wasn't right. So that this color of scarlet, that's luxury, that's splendor, that's royalty, that's power, that's representative of who this individual or what this individual, at least in a worldly sense, will represent. And then you have a full of blasphemous names here. We talk about the blasphemous names that they had. This is because of his self defecation. Okay, so I want to go back here and make sure I'm pulling all this together. So the scarlet beast was full of blasphemous names. Remember, he is calling himself God, calling himself Lord, calling himself, and he's full of all kind of blasphemous ways of talking about himself, because all these are lies about who God is. These are all blasphemous words. He had seven heads and 10 horns. This is this is an extent of the Antichrist's political allegiance, and we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. In verse 4, you see the woman was dressed. She was dressed in purple and scarlet, adorned with gold and jewels. Well, the colors, again, this is royal, nobility, and wealth. Okay, remember, this is an intoxicating thing. Okay, its symbolism here is that being a part of this is affluency, is wealth, is success. Okay, the woman is portrayed as a prostitute who has plied her trade successfully and become extremely wealthy. So being a part of this has made this system successful. Okay, a prostitute of the day would have, had she been successful, had she been good at her craft, would have been fairly wealthy and would have dressed the part and looked the part. And it goes on here about how she adorned herself with jewels and stuff. Prostitutes of the day often dressed in fine clothes and precious jewels, and the purpose there was to allure their victims. The religious harlot of Babylon is no different, adorning herself to lure the nations into her grasp. So I'm trying to think of a proper way to say this. Again, I'm trying to be careful with my words here. But if a woman is trying to woo a man, she gussies herself up, right?
Absolutely.
If she's trying to persuade a gentleman, and a prostitute may be more forward. She'll want to because if she doesn't lure a man into her bedroom, she doesn't get paid. I'm not trying to be lewd, especially where we're at, but this is a scriptural reference here. So if she doesn't lure a man into the bedroom, she's not going to extort any money out of him. So she has to look the part. She has to dress nice. She has to smell nice. She needs to look like a lady of class. Okay, she doesn't need to look like a common, street corner gal, if you will, what I'm saying. So this is someone who is trying to woo someone in, and that's the purpose behind that. So she looks good. She looks attractive. Looks like somebody would want to be involved with. And then it says here that she had a golden cup, and this is still evidence of the harlot's great wealth. But the pure gold is defiled by the filthiness of her immorality. Just as a prostitute might first get her victim drunk, so the harlot's system deceives the nations into committing spiritual fornication with her. So, like I say, I don't know if y'all I watch a lot of westerns, and a lot of westerns they have those ladies of promiscuity at the taverns, okay, and again, I'm trying to y'all don't grin at me too much. Y'all know I'm trying to be. I'm trying to be. Are you a fan of Miss Kitty? Okay, so no, they had these westerns, and one of the things that you see here is that in these taverns, these ladies tend to approach the men at the tables, and they will offer to buy them a drink. They offer to pour them a drink. They offer to so they're trying to get the liquor flowing. And why? Because that dulls the senses, and it opens them up to want to participate in other activities. And if they can convince them to do that, then they can profit from it. And so this is talking.
That reminds me of an old saying.
What's that?
Candy is dandy, but liquor is quicker, and they're using liquor.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's why a lot of people do it, so that they're not thinking straight, and a lot of people do it willingly. And that's where the whole saying, Las Vegas has a saying built on that. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Well, because most of the time people that are doing it are so drunk they don't remember what they did. Yeah. There's a gentleman I know. This is when he was much younger, and I won't say his name because I don't want to get him in trouble. He's happily married, and I want it to stay that way. But at a certain age, when he was a young man, when he turned, I think he was in his early 20s, may have been his 21st birthday, he went out with some buddies, and they became quite intoxicated through the liquor, if you will. And he says, I have no idea what happened on that birthday. He said, I know it was a good one. He said, and he said he still got mementos of the gentleman's club that they went into that night. And so it was just this kind of thing. Liquor makes people do stupid things and stuff like that, and it makes it easy for the harlot to deceive. And I want to go back to the gold for a minute, because the gold, remember, pure gold is a symbol. Again, remember, everything that the Antichrist does is blasphemous, all right? Yeah. That pure gold would have been a cup that would have been used, or a bowl would have been used in the temple, right? Well, it's profaned by the immorality of this prostitute, right? She's got this pure gold cup, but it's profaned by her sin, by her wickedness, by her deceit, okay? So, but it's symbolic of just like a lady of the night would get her, uses the term victim here. It might allure a customer by the coercion of alcohol. Now, on her forehead, there was a name that was written. Now, this goes in with Roman custom. It was customary for Roman prostitutes to wear a headband with their name on it, and this was for kind of a parading of their wretchedness for the all to see. Now, the harlot's forehead is emblazoned with a threefold title that is described in the world's final false religious system. So it talks here about the mystery. Okay, in the New Testament, we see that truth is once hidden, but in the New Testament, we also see truth revealed. There are some things even in here that are not going to be fully revealed to us, so we may not understand it all. But the spirituality of Babylon's true identity has not yet been revealed. So the precise details of how all of this will be manifest to the world is not yet known. But we do know that the reference here is to Babylon the Great, and this Babylon is distinct from the historical geographical city of Babylon that we know. And it was still existed in the day of John when he wrote this. So the details of John's vision cannot be applied historically at this point. Okay, this may be a euphemism for something we don't quite yet know. All right, it talks here about her being the mother of prostitutes. All false religions stem ultimately from Babel or from Babylon. Okay, so this is going to be the root of all false religions, I guess. I wonder if this is going to be one that kind of swallows them up and makes it a catch-all. All right, if you go back to Babel here, do y'all remember the story of the Tower of Babel? Okay, so basically after the flood, after Noah, God commanded mankind spread out all over the world and all that. Well, a lot of men didn't want to do that. They wanted to stay together. They were going to build a great city and a tower that reached up to the heavens. Well, at Babel, God confused the languages, right? Well, why was that? What was the purpose? Because man had a wicked heart, and man's wicked heart and the power of the unity, I can't even talk, the power of the unity of man combined with the wickedness of their heart made them very dangerous, right? So what did he do? He confused the languages. Perhaps whatever commonality, comes to fruition, this prostitute will bring some commonality, some common ground. When you all speak the same language, and I heard something really intelligent the other day. It was talking about in our culture, we celebrate diversity, and I think that as the American culture, I think that's we're often called the great melting pot, where all these cultures combine. So I think that's a positive. That's not meant as a negative statement, but I think when people miss, if you're not united about something, it makes it very difficult to celebrate what is different, right? So, like, I'll give you a real simple example. So, if I know I'm kind of outnumbered in here, okay, but I know that like Alabama football, You can get people who are all Alabama fans, and they can agree on Alabama football. They may disagree about a litany of other things, but they can come together and talk about Alabama football. Well, you may not really like something that I enjoy, but we're both Alabama football fans, so that gives us one common thing that we could. And you may go, well, Jonathan, I don't like deer hunting. I mean, I'm glad you do. I'd rather stay in the bed and stay warm and all that kind of stuff. If you want to go do that, no, but roll tide, good buddy. You know, there's something to unite. Now, when everybody spoke the same language pre-Tower of Babel, they had a commonality, right? And when you have things in common, the differences become less important because you have something of commonality, right? And therefore, you can then appreciate the minor differences because you have major unity. Are you with me? There's something that you're united in. Well, when the languages were confused, that created all kinds of things, right? And then when people are different from you, when you don't have a common unity, instead of celebrating the differences drive you apart, right? So cultures aren't typically built on people who are different from one another. They're typically built on people that bought into the same thing, that have a united, I'm talking about world cultures throughout society. So in American culture today, should you celebrate your differences? Yeah, absolutely. But you have to appreciate that there's something about America that unites us all as Americans. Does that make sense? Okay? So what you have here is the mother of all these prostitutes, right? These false religions, all this kind of stuff. Where does that start? All the way back to Babel. Idolatry. They wanted to be God. And they were united in this thought process. They wanted to be in control. They wanted to make the decisions. They wanted to be in charge. So what did God do? He confused the languages. So kind of the root call of idolatry goes all the way back. Does that make sense? In fact, if you go all the way back to the garden, what was the purpose of Eve eating the fruit?
To be like God.
To be like God. Okay? So she could be God herself.
Yeah.
That's idolatry. Us wanting to be God rather than let God be God. Okay, does that make sense? Have I lost you?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I have lost you, or it does make sense.
Don't make sense.
Okay. I do. Tracy will do that to me. I'll ask her, do you want pizza or do you want chicken? Yes. So you want a chicken pizza? Okay. No. Well, that's what you said. All right, so anyway. All right, picking up here, where are we at? Verse 6. So she's drinking in her cup the blood of the saints and the martyrs of Jesus. Now, it'd be easy for us to think this is the Old Testament saints, but there's an important distinction here. This pictures the witnesses and describes the martyrs of Christ. So these are the martyrs of the tribulation. And John's pointing out that the harlot has murdered them for the sake of the false religion, and she's killed millions of believers all over the centuries. So this final system will be far more deadly than anything that preceded it. Okay? If you think about the Holocaust, where they were rounding up Jews and executing Jews, that may be the call to unity, is that they all start attacking believers. You know, and that may be it. I don't know. But it's certainly going to happen in any way. That's why at the beginning I talked about all the countries around the world. There's the 50 top countries where Christians are persecuted, okay? And the thing about it is, I don't want to get into that in this scope, but if you look at the reasons for that, where areas are hostile, it tends to, you see trends of what is the hostile force behind it, okay? Now, you can make your own assertions about why that is, but regardless. Picking up here in verse 7. All right, well, I'm going to end verse 6 and then pick up with verse 7. It says, "When I saw her, I marveled greatly. But the angel said to me, Why do you marvel? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast and the 7 heads and the 10 horns that carries her. The beast that you saw was and is not, and is about to rise from the bottomless pit and go to destruction. And the dwellers on the earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, will marvel to see the beast, because it was and is not and is to come. This calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. There are also 7 kings, 5 of whom have fallen. One is the other has not yet come, and when he does come, he must remain only a little while. As for the beast that was and is not, it is an 8th, but it belongs to the 7, and it goes to destruction. And the 10 horns that you saw, and the 10 kings who have not yet received royal power, but they are to receive authority as kings for 1 hour, together with the beast. These are of one mind, and they hand over the power and their power and authority to the beast, and they will make war on the Lamb, and the Lamb will conquer them, for he is the Lord of lords and King of kings, and those with him are called the chosen and faithful. Okay, so let's talk about that. So in verse 7 here, it talks about the mystery. Not that Babylon is a false system of religion, because that is already known. That's not the mystery. The mystery is that the beast will fully support the harlot together to exert a vast influence over the whole world. So it's through this system that they're going to come to power. But the beast, you see in verse 8 there, this represents both a king and kingdom, and is referred to by the term, by this term, the beast. So it's not a reference singular there. It's the king and the kingdom together. And it goes on to talk about how this beast was and is not and is about to rise. So this is a reference to the Antichrist and the false resurrection. Now, we talked about the false resurrection. Remember, Satan is a mimicker. So he has to mimic Christ, okay? The death, burial, resurrection. So this is going to be some miraculous. He's going to die and he's going to be resurrected. We talked about how that will, in all likelihood, be a facade, that it won't really happen, but it's going to deceive the nations. And the resurrection is going to be the Antichrist at that time. It talks about from the bottomless pit here. After the quote-unquote resurrection, the Antichrist will become possessed by a great demon from the abyss, okay? And this is all set up for the destruction that is to come. This is an eternal destruction. This is basically being cast into the lake of fire, the place where the Antichrist it will be destroyed. Eternal damnation in the lake of fire. Now, it goes on a little bit further here as you're reading this, that the dwellers on the earth whose name have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world marvel at the beast, because it was and is not and is to come. So the lost will be deceived by the beast, right? The Antichrist, right? This resurrection and all this is going to deceive the people whose name is not written in the Lamb's Book of Life. Now, I want to be clear about this. I feel like every time I have to bring this up, because I want there to be absolute clarity from at least from me on this. So you have the Lamb's Book of Life, and it says here, written from the foundation of the earth. And MacArthur here, even that I use his notes here on this, he talks about the elect. I am very, very cautious about the elect. I talked about this, I think, either last Sunday or maybe 2 weeks ago for sure, about there's a difference between God already knowing what's going to happen and God already deciding what's going to happen. Those are not the same thing, okay? And I use the example of like a father or a mother watching your children. You can tell them no, but you know what they're going to do. You can watch them. Now, you can't spank them before they do it. You have to give them an option, right? But then after they do it, you have to punish them, right? So, you know, and I heard somebody the other day, and they were so off course, and I think this is a danger that the church deals with a lot, is because these so-called intellectuals, they would say, well, if God is love, why wouldn't he just make everybody good and that would just be the end of it? Well, that's not love. Love is, you know, if you force love, it's not love, it's slavery, right? Love has to be a choice, and so they used all this, you know, well, if God really was good, he would have done this, and he wouldn't have done this, and he wouldn't have done this, and part of me sits back there and it's like, kind of pulls a Job, and it's like, where were you when he laid the foundation of the earth? Of course, you know, this is an atheist and non-believer, so that would have just went right over their head. But the whole point of it is, you have a situation here where People think that God picks and chooses, and so He's already decided from the moment you're born whether you're going to heaven or hell. He already knows from the moment you're born whether you're going to heaven or hell, but He doesn't make that choice. You know who makes that choice? You do, right? And He loves you enough to let you make that choice, okay? But I'll digress. So I don't want you to get too caught up in that, the role of the elect, okay? But those that are not will be deceived, and it talks about here from the foundation of the world. This is a reference back to God's original plan, the way He wanted it to be. Perfect, right? Without flaw. So all the way back when things were perfect, God knew even then what was going to happen. So it talks here also about the 7 mountains that the harlot was on. The Greek word here often referred to, it actually translates to hills, but MacArthur kind of gets into here with some commentators that interpret this as meaning Rome, which sits on 7 hills. But the final worldwide system of this false religion is going to include, Rome, but it's not necessarily limited to Rome. But specifically, the 7 mountains may be a context or symbolization of the 7 kingdoms and their kings. Because it goes on there to talk about the 7 kings there in verse 10. And this represents the 7 great world empires. Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, and eventually that of the Antichrist. And Daniel talks about some of this in chapter 2 of Daniel, verses 37 through 45. But it goes on here to talk about how 5 have already fallen, and one is the other. So at this time, it's thought that John was writing about Egypt, Assyria, and Babylon, and Medo-Persia, and the Greek empires that had gone out of existence. Rome still existed at that day and time, and the Antichrist kingdom had not yet come. So when it does, it will be a brief kingdom, and he will and he will end in perdition. So this particular 7 kingdoms, some have been, some are yet to come. I'll kind of put it that way. But it goes on verse 11. It gets kind of confusing here because it talks about the 8th kingdom, which was also part of the 7th kingdom, and it talks about how he was and is not. Well, this is a reference again back to the Antichrist kingdom. It's said that he is both the 7th and the 8th kingdoms because supposedly he dies and is resurrected. And he is the 7th king before the 8th king in his resurrection. So basically, if I'm a king and I get shot in the head, well, I'm dead. And then the next day, all of a sudden, I stand up and that hole in my head closes. I'm alive again. I'm taken back over as king again. Okay? What? Number 8, right? So I'm technically number 7 and number 8. And maybe that number 8 also has to do with the fact that, remember, the resurrected, I'm using that term very loosely, the resurrected Antichrist is going to be demon-filled, right? So it may be the same vessel, but be somewhat of a different spirit. I don't know if that makes sense, but I just throw that out there. Verse 12 talks about the 10 kings. These are kings that are the sub-rulers of the Antichrist, and they will be divided. He will divide his kingdom into 10 administrative districts, but they have not yet received their royal power, and thus the kings cannot be identified in any historical figure. So we don't know who this is, who this might be, but it will come at some point. And it talks there about, they'll be there for 1 hour. Now, this is symbolic, actually, of the brief period that is the 3.5 years that Satan will rule. Okay, that 3.5 years. We've referenced that many times. I don't want to dissect that again, but that doesn't mean a literal 1 hour. It's talking about basically the one time, right? So it'll be that 3.5 years. And this is all leading up to Armageddon. And that's why I try not to confuse y'all, because we've already talked about Armageddon twice. This is what I'm saying. It goes back and forth, because you can't cover everything that's going to happen perfectly symmetrically, right? So it's like a back and forth, okay? So all this stuff is happening simultaneously, and I know it's confusing. Gosh, I struggle with it immensely, and that's why I'm trying to tell y'all, if you feel confused, don't feel bad, okay? Just picture this. John saw all this, then he had to write it out. How confused do you think John was about all this stuff? So hopefully that if John was confused, and John walked with Jesus, I guarantee you, he was probably a little confused about all this himself. So,
although the Holy Spirit was directing him.
Holy Spirit directing him.
And
Right.
then he understood it.
Right, and he had probably a clearer vision than what we're getting. He's trying to put his vision into words. Let's see here. Verse 14, they made war, and this again is reference to the Battle of Armageddon, and this was war against the Lamb. All right, and the Lamb utterly destroyed these kings. Okay, he is described here as Lord of Lords and King of Kings. This is the title for God that emphasizes His sovereignty over all other rulers, and to whom He has delegated authority. So this makes it clear that they went to battle with the Lamb, but they didn't have any victory with the Lamb. Right? This is Jesus comes in, and buddy, he just shuts down the show. Right? He shows up, and he doesn't make no bones about it, boy. He takes them to the house. Okay. Do y'all remember that movie, Remember the Titans? My daddy loved that movie, Remember the Titans. There's a movie, there's a game late in the season there, and it's a playoff game. And Coach Yost makes his famous speech. He says, I don't want them to gain another yard. I want you to blitz all night. If they cross the line of scrimmage, I'm going to take every last one of you out. You make sure they remember forever the night they played the Titans. And they break the huddle, and everybody runs out there, and he looks over at Coach Yost looks over at Coach Boone, and he says, leave no doubt. And my daddy loved that, leave no doubt. Well, Jesus ain't going to leave no doubt. He's going to clean house. He comes in, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So we pick up here in verse 15. It says, and the angel said to me, the waters that you saw where the prostitute is seated are the peoples and the multitudes and the nations and the languages. And the 10 horns that you saw, they are the beast. They and the beast will hate the prostitute, and they will make her desolate and naked, and devour her flesh, and burn her up with fire. For God has put it into their hearts to carry out His purpose by being of one mind and handing over their royal power to the beast until the word of God is fulfilled. And the woman that you saw is the great city that has dominion over the kings of the earth. Okay, so in closing here, we'll finish up with this, but in verses 15, 16 here, you see that in verse 15 where it talks about the waters you saw where the prostitute sit on are the peoples, the multitudes, the nations, the languages. Remember, she is bringing all things together for some form of unity, okay, under this religious political power, right? So I don't know exactly what that means, other than I think it's talking about how all these things that had divided them all, for whatever reason, she was able to ride them like an ocean, right? They were before where they would have been factors that would have caused disunity. Now these are things that she rode or set upon. It goes on here in verses 16 and 17. It talks about how basically the beast and the rulers and the kings, they're at a certain point where they use her to rise to power, they're going to hate her. They're going to hate this system, this religious thing, and they're going to want to devour it. Okay, and it's going to be a brutal, devastating thing, right? And why are they doing it? Well, it says that God put it in their heart to do it, right? Now, all throughout history, very evil people God has used to do very mighty things, right? And so this prostitute, this harlot, the wickedness and the abomination that she is, he's going to use Satan, the Antichrist, and all of these kings to destroy the source that brought them to power, right? And I kind of throw back to King Darius, and I've actually prayed this prayer before because sometimes you deal with some people that aren't so nice. I was like, God, if you can use King Darius, please use so and so, because God throughout history has used a lot of wicked and evil people to do good things. And by the same counterpart, there have been quote-unquote good people that have done very bad things. So you have to look at it in context here. He's going to use Satan against himself. What did Jesus say? A house divided against itself can what? Cannot stand. Okay? So, lost my place here. So it kind of concludes well. It says, this woman that you saw is the great city of dominion over the kings of the earth. It kind of rounds us out by saying, you kind of get this whole picture. You get the rise to power through the harlot. You have the kings and the Antichrist come to power. And then you have them turn around and devour the woman. And all this culminating in the great city of Babylon, which is a euphemism of some sort. I don't think it's a literal Babylon. But this is the center place of power and authority for the whole shooting match. So if you kind of look at it in context, everybody's all excited about the prostitute. They ride her power and her unity and all out till they come to power. And then they want to strike her down so that she can't challenge their power. Does that make sense? If you follow that flow chart, that's what it seems to happen. And like we say, this is all going to happen. And there's the battle there. Mention the battle against the Lamb, which we know to be Armageddon. And the King of Kings and Lord of Lords shows up and shows off. Okay. All right. I know that's confusing and stressful, and I'm wore out. Okay. Okay. Is there any questions or comments, or please any clarifications, because I know I didn't get all that right.
I wouldn't know it if you did.
Revelations is tough. It's tough, okay? All right. Well, Clint, would you dismiss us in prayer, and we'll get out of here.